The power of leaving silently. A path to peace. There comes a time in every journey when walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. In a world addicted to noise, validation, and dramatic exits, there is unmatched strength in leaving silently. This kind of departure doesn't beg for attention, it doesn't seek applause, it simply honors your peace, because true power is not in proving a point, but in protecting your purpose. When you master the art of quiet exits, you begin to realize not every room deserves your voice, and not every ending needs a sound. Walking away without noise is the loudest declaration of self-worth. There is a kind of strength that doesn't shout. It doesn't slam doors, post statuses, or seek revenge. It simply walks away quietly, purposefully, and with dignity. That is the power of self-worth. When you understand who you are, you no longer feel the need to explain, defend, or retaliate. Walking away without noise becomes your statement. It's not passive, it's powerful, because in silence there is clarity, and in that clarity there is identity. When you walk away quietly, you say to the world, I know who I am, and I refuse to be where my value is overlooked, my peace is disturbed, or my purpose is delayed. This kind of departure doesn't mean you're afraid or defeated. It means you are done lowering yourself to be understood by those who refuse to see you. People often confuse silence with weakness, but silence can be the shield of the wise. Anyone can yell when they're hurt. Anyone can stay to prove a point. But it takes real confidence to say nothing and still walk in full authority. Self-worth is knowing that your presence is a gift, and where that gift is not honored, you quietly take it somewhere it will be. This doesn't come from pride, but from revelation. You realize that your time, your energy, your voice, they are investments. And just like any wise investor, you must learn when to stop pouring into spaces that yield no return. There are relationships, environments, and positions where staying only drains you and delays your growth. Leaving without noise doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you finally cared about yourself enough to let go. You stop chasing closure from people who were never open to truth in the first place. You stop explaining your value to those committed to misunderstanding you, and you stop begging for respect from places where your presence has become routine and your worth taken for granted. Silent departure is not about escape, it's about elevation. It's about choosing peace over performance, healing over holding on, and purpose over pride. When you walk away silently, you don't just exit a situation. You enter a higher level of self-respect. You are no longer moved by emotions, but led by discernment. You don't need to prove a thing because the fruit of your decision will speak for you. The noise may be absent, but the impact is loud. People will feel the absence of what they failed to appreciate. That's the irony of quiet exits. They echo, and they echo loudly in the hearts of those who thought you'd never leave. But you didn't leave to prove a point. You left to protect your peace. And that, more than any word you could say, is the loudest declaration of your self-worth. So, the next time life demands a response, ask yourself, do I need to speak, or do I need to leave? Because sometimes silence isn't the absence of sound, it's the presence of power. Peace is not found in reaction, but in the discipline of quiet departure. Peace is not a place you stumble upon. It's a decision you make with discipline. It's not born out of chaos, nor does it bloom in the soil of constant reaction. Real peace begins the moment you stop reacting to everything that tries to provoke you. We live in a world that feeds off reaction, where every offense demands a reply, every betrayal demands confrontation, and every disappointment urges us to make a scene. But peace doesn't respond to pressure, It flows from restraint. The power of quiet departure is in its refusal to engage with what doesn't serve your spirit. When you react, you give away your power. When you depart quietly, you keep your peace. Silence becomes your boundary, not your surrender. It's easy to argue, to defend, to retaliate. It's natural, but peace is supernatural. It requires discipline, and that discipline requires maturity. You come to understand that not every insult needs your voice, not every conflict needs your presence, and not every storm needs your sail. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is to walk away and say nothing. Why? Because peace is too expensive to be sacrificed on the altar of ego. Reaction is emotional, but departure is intentional. Reaction satisfies the moment, but peace secures your future. There is power in staying calm when chaos expects you to collapse, and there is wisdom in leaving when staying only stirs storms within you. The more you value peace, the less you allow yourself to be provoked. Not because you are indifferent, but because you are aligned. Aligned with your purpose, aligned with your identity, aligned with what truly matters. The person who learns to leave quietly is the person who has mastered self-control. They know that silence is not empty. It is full of decisions, full of healing, full of direction. Peace comes to those who no longer see reaction as a victory, but as a trap. Because the enemy doesn't always come to destroy you, sometimes he comes to distract you, and there's no greater distraction than getting caught up in battles you were never assigned to fight. That's why quiet departure is not running, it's rising. It is rising above the need to explain, defend, or prove yourself to people who have already made up their minds. It is rising above pettiness, offense, and the need to always be understood. And in that rise, peace finds you. You discover that peace was never about the absence of conflict around you, but the absence of chaos within you. That stillness, that calm, that unbothered silence, that's not weakness, that's dominion. So, when your spirit is stirred and life demands your reaction, remember, true strength is not how loud you can respond, but how deeply you can remain unmoved. Peace doesn't scream, it settles. And when you master the discipline of quiet departure, you don't just leave behind the noise. You walk into a life that cannot be shaken. When you leave silently, you let God speak loudly on your behalf. There is a divine authority that moves when you decide to be still. When you leave silently, you don't just walk away. You make room for God to step in. Silence is not absence, it's alignment. It is the sacred space where you stop striving, stop explaining, and stop fighting battles that were never yours to begin with. Too often, we try to be our own defenders, our own vindicators. We use our words, our arguments, and our emotions to prove our point, protect our name, and preserve our dignity. But there's a deeper wisdom that says, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. That is the power of silent departure. It's not about retreat, it's about trust. Trusting that the one who sees all, knows all, and governs all will speak for you in ways your voice never could. God doesn't need your drama to deliver you. He doesn't need your noise to vindicate your name. He simply needs your obedience. And sometimes obedience looks like closing your mouth and walking away. It looks like stepping back so heaven can step forward. When you leave quietly, you surrender your reputation into the hands of the one who knows your heart. You no longer need to be seen, heard, or justified by people who never had the grace to understand you. Instead, you allow your silence to be the stage for God's voice, and his voice never returns void. Silent exits carry the weight of heaven when they are led by faith, not fear. You leave not because you're weak, but because you're wise enough to know that some wars are not won by words, but by worship. You understand that your silence can echo louder in eternity than any speech made in frustration. Sometimes the greatest testimony is not how loudly you shouted, but how peacefully you walked away. And when you walk in peace, you walk with God. He becomes your advocate, your defender, your vindicator. And here's the beauty. God doesn't just defend you, He elevates you. He uses the silence you endured as the foundation for the platform He's preparing. What people meant for your rejection, He turns into your redirection. What they thought was your end, He uses as your beginning, but that can only happen when you leave the battlefield and let God take over. Silent exits are acts of faith. They declare, I don't need to fight this. God has already gone before me. They say, my silence is not defeat, it's divine trust. When you walk away in silence, you don't lose your voice. You place it in God's hands, and when He speaks, the very people who doubted you will witness what grace can do. So don't be afraid to leave quietly. Don't be afraid to trust God with your silence, because when He speaks for you, no lie can stand, no weapon can prosper, and no door meant for you can remain shut. Let your silence be the signal that you've moved, and let heaven do the rest. Silence in separation is the seed of elevation. There are some places you cannot rise from until you separate, and there are some elevations you will never experience until you choose the quiet path of departure. In life, elevation is not just about talent or time. It's about release. It's about knowing when to let go, when to withdraw, and when to separate without bitterness, without announcement, and without blame. This kind of separation isn't loud. It doesn't need to be, because it's not for others. It's for your destiny, and silence becomes the seed you plant in faith, trusting that what you're walking away from is not greater than what you're walking toward. Too many people want to be promoted while still holding on to what's familiar. But you can't soar while you're still chained to environments that feed your insecurity, relationships that stunt your growth, and cycles that drain your vision. Silence in separation is powerful because it denies the enemy an audience. It denies your critics satisfaction. And most importantly, it creates space for transformation. When you separate quietly, you're not just leaving something behind. You're giving yourself permission to evolve. You're not trying to prove a point to anyone. You're simply obeying the inner knowing that says, this is no longer for me. And that realization, when honored with silence and maturity, becomes the soil where your next level is born. Growth doesn't happen in noise. It happens in stillness. It happens in hidden seasons where no one sees you, no one hears you, and no one celebrates you. But heaven is watching. Your silent separation is the womb where your future is being formed. It's the sacred place where God works on your character, develops your vision, and prunes your attachments. You begin to realize that separation is not rejection, it's preparation. You're not being cast aside, you're being set apart. And being set apart always precedes being lifted up. The silence becomes sacred because it shields you from distractions, protects your process, and preserves your peace. Every elevation demands a shedding. You cannot go higher while carrying the weight of yesterday's wounds, yesterday's voices, and yesterday's comfort zones. And that shedding isn't always public, it's often private and deeply painful. But when you endure it silently, you mature. You begin to understand that destiny doesn't respond to drama. It responds to discipline. You stop chasing closure and start choosing clarity. You stop seeking validation and start pursuing purpose. And the more you honor your silence, the more heaven honors your steps. The story of many who rise isn't written in their applause. It's written in the quiet decisions they made when no one was watching. It's written in the moment they walked away, not with bitterness, but with boldness. Not to make a statement, but to make a shift. Silent separation requires faith because the results are not immediate. You leave before the reward. You release before the recognition. You obey before the outcome. But rest assured, what you sow in silence, God will reward in public. The separation that costs you your comfort will lead to the elevation that confirms your calling. So don't despise the silence. Don't resent the loneliness. That's where wings are formed. That's where strength is built. That's where elevation begins. The caterpillar doesn't make noise when it leaves the leaf. It retreats into a silent cocoon, and while the world sees nothing, transformation is happening. Then one day it emerges, not crawling but flying. So must you. Your silent separation is your cocoon. It's your hidden season, but elevation is coming, and when it does, people won't understand how you got there. They won't see the tears, the prayers, the restraint, or the discipline. All they'll see is the flight, but you'll know. The real miracle wasn't in the elevation, it was in the silence that birthed it. So if you're in a season where you're called to walk away without noise, obey that call, trust the process, honor the silence, because separation handled with humility always precedes elevation marked by glory. And when God elevates you, no man, no opinion, no opposition can bring you down. Silence in separation is not your ending. It's your launching pad. You don't need to announce your exit when your purpose already knows its next door. One of the most liberating truths you'll ever embrace is this. You don't need to announce your exit when your purpose has already prepared your next door. Purpose doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't need a crowd, a farewell, or a round of applause. When it's time to move, purpose speaks. Not with noise, but with direction. You see, destiny isn't loud. It's precise. And those who are deeply aligned with their purpose don't waste time explaining why they're leaving spaces that no longer fit the blueprint of their assignment. They just go quietly, confidently, because when you know where you're going, you stop arguing about where you've been. You stop needing to justify your departure to people who were never meant to journey with you in the first place. In fact, many times the people who want the loudest explanations are the ones who contributed the most to your delay. But when purpose calls, you answer not with excuses, but with movement. Your life begins to shift when you realize that God doesn't need you to declare your every move. He needs you to obey. Your next door is already open. Your only job is to walk through it without dragging the weight of opinions, explanations, or unfinished conversations. There is a maturity that develops in silence, a confidence that blossoms when you no longer seek external validation for internal convictions. You leave not because you're angry, but because you're aware. Aware that where you're going cannot be reached by staying stuck in places designed for who you used to be. Some doors require you to leave unnoticed because the noise of your exit would alert distractions trying to follow you into your next. Quiet exits protect your momentum, they protect your energy, and they protect the sanctity of what God is doing in you privately before He reveals it publicly. Too many people miss their next because they're still trying to explain their now. But purpose doesn't dwell in explanations. It dwells in execution. The moment you start walking, doors start unlocking. Favor begins to find you. Strategy begins to flow. And the same people who were waiting on a performance will have no choice but to watch the manifestation. That's the beauty of quiet exits. Your absence becomes your statement. It says, I've outgrown this space, without you ever needing to say a word. And when you step into your next door, those who couldn't hear your words will see your results. Because fruit speaks, progress speaks, peace speaks, you don't have to convince anyone of your growth when your life is producing evidence. In fact, the most powerful moves are often made in silence. Purpose has a way of redirecting you without debate. It whispers, "It's time," and when you obey, things begin to align in ways you never imagined. Resources find you, the right people appear, clarity sharpens. Vision expands, and all of it unfolds without the need for noise. So let them wonder, let them assume, let them speculate. Your purpose is not on trial. You don't owe anyone the script for your next chapter, especially when that chapter was never written for their understanding. Learn to exit with grace, leave without malice, move without making a scene, because when you're truly called, your movement carries weight. Even in silence, God will always confirm what He called you to do by how He provides after you obey. If it's truly your next door, you won't have to force it open. It will respond to your obedience, not your announcement. So stop waiting for the right time to explain your departure. Purpose already knows your destination. The next level isn't waiting for your justification. It's waiting for your arrival. Move in silence. Let your next speak. And when it does, let it speak so clearly that every silent sacrifice, every quiet decision, and every private surrender becomes worth it. Because when purpose leads the way, the door will always be open, and you won't need to knock twice.